Hello everybody, welcome back to Talkin Tricks, and today we're dissecting this video by Johannes, and basically he fixed all of Vert Kicks. So we're gonna see the once and for all solution here, gonna figure it out. Sorry, I don't mean to act like I'm talking shit about Johannes. I actually like
No,
this
I
guy.
actually, yeah, I like Johannes a lot too. I think he's got some pretty cool ideas.
Mhm.
I listened to a little bit of it. There's some points that I definitely agree with. So
Yeah,
it'll be good to hear this whole thing out and we can all talk about it together.
and I think he ironically proclaims it at the beginning too. But
No, I love the megaphone style we're about to see.
But we're gonna watch this together. Pause at the right spots, so you boys can raise your hands if you guys need to pause it. So, right.
Attention everyone, my name is Johannes Anttila and today I'm gonna fix the whole tricking kicks terminology.
Fixing the whole Vert Kicks terminology is actually so easy. But for those who are not really trickers, who don't really trick, or you are new to tricking and you don't really think about these things, the issue with tricking Vert Kicks terminology is that every single amount of degrees is wrong. There is not a single kick that is correct. Can you imagine that? Every single name has a weird amount of vertical rotations that is most of the time way higher than the real amount of spinning. And today I'm gonna fix the names just for fun. I know once you learn the...
So just really quick, I do want to interject because this is already where me and the boys diverge, but I think this is such a non-issue. But the boys do want to fix this, so.
It's
Uh,
so it
it's
is
not the primary issue, I think.
yeah, it's certainly not one of the biggest problems in tricking terminology, but I do think that it is worth recognizing if one of the things that you want your language to do is to be as simple as possible for the purposes of making learning it easier and making it easier to state new tricks, their name when you haven't seen them before. I feel like in service of that, it does make sense to do what TKT did, and then obviously what Johannes is going to do here, and what the true rotation, the rotation reset convention does for BTTT. I think it all makes sense just from the point of view of Occam's razor of just once we've gotten rid of this arbitrary translation that we've added to each of the rotations of each of the different vert kicks, it's just one less thing for me to have to remember and for to have to teach you to memorize if you're going to learn the language.
I could agree with that, but I also do think that it does serve as almost like a distractor in the sense that everyone knows kick terminology is broken, but I think we think that for the wrong reasons, and this is that reason. But we can continue with the video.
naming system, and you don't call cheat 900 cheat 900 but cheat 9, kind of like a nickname. It works really well, but I just want to make a system that works way better. I just want to represent...
He actually did hit on my argument. It's like a nickname and it works, and I think it does work well. I agree with him. So
Yeah, no,
it works well once you've learned it.
Yeah,
And it works well because it's what everyone uses. Not necessarily because it's logically intuitive or makes sense.
Yeah. I've made the point before that you could just have any sequence of distinct things, and similarly any sequence of increasing rotation amounts, any sequence of increasing numbers could therefore stand in for the rotation amounts that we use in vert kicks. There's no difference between any of them, but when you are using the actual rotation in air between foot positions associated to that trick, there's some sort of objective connection between the numbers that are showing up in the name and the numbers that are showing up in the actual physical description of the trick. And so that just makes the name more physically descriptive. Whereas before the name is just a nickname. It holds the place and it allows you to distinguish it from other things. But now this one also contains some information.
Yeah, that's fair.
And
We're also really quick just running into issues with this idea of nicknames where we're using numbers like this to be a nickname for kicks, and now we're also using them in places for flips like dub 10 And
No, we're not. No one's
I-
no
I-
one's,
um,
no one's allowed to do that.
There are
You
some
don't-
people-
If you do that, you don't do that. It's not. It's no. Stop it.
I'd
while
say
I
it's
agree
almost
it
like
shouldn't-
50-50. Like half the people
While I
do
agree it
use
shouldn't be done,
but-
people say it, and we run into several issues with the nickname convention already, just because of developing terminology.
Mhm.
So
I think
That's all I
that's
had to
the
say
new
about that.
terminology's fault, but that's just me.
To the issues that I find with this whole mess that is tricking vertical kicks terminology. Fun fact, the root problem of the whole terminology starts with the term 540 kick. There are many different 540 kicks.
Stop,
Yes.
please. This is incredible. We have come to the exact same conclusions before. Like we have before mentioned that this is basically all due to the fact that obviously tornado kick has its own name that's completely separate from the concept of rotation. So 540 is where we kick things off, and yeah, that's where it all goes wrong because obviously a 540 kick does not have 540 degrees of rotation in it.
well, that additionally too, we start off on this precedent where like we start counting round kicks on their swiped variation counterpart. So that's to say, it would make more sense if tornado was 540 and then 540 was hyper 540, which I know sounds weird, but the issue is we call cheat 9, which has no swipe, cheat 9, but like 540 involves a swipe.
Exactly.
So
it's
like
oh, sorry.
just that, like we've already started off from like uneven foundations.
Yeah, no, it's if in order to be consistent with higher order vert kick terminology, the term tornado kick has to go.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that, but I will say I think he hits on this in like a few seconds, but I think the exact root of where the fuck up happens is the transition from 540 to 720, because those are the same amount of degrees, and we added degrees for some reason. So,
Well, but additionally, like I had said, because we have this variated version that has more rotation inherently than its true base tornado.
Yeah.
Like we're gonna have this this illogical jump that we have to make to continue and course correct essentially.
I'm curious what you guys are gonna say about his hyper and swipe argument. So we'll get to that.
Okay.
But by far most popular and the actual 540 kick is the cheat step 540 kick. All the 540 kicks have about 360 degrees of rotation in the air. And why is the 540 kick the root of the problem? It's not that far off, but to be honest, I don't know what the early martial artists were smoking when they came up with this term. And I don't know what early trickers were thinking when they named cheat 720 720. Because fun fact, cheat 720 and 540 kick have the same amount of rotation in the air. And like with the term 540, there are several 720 kicks. So in conclusion, the biggest problem with the terminology is that the term 540 is wrong, and then everything is added up from there. But the adding up actually makes sense after the cheat 720, because next is the 900 category, and this is basically a half turn more than the 720, because when you change the hook kick to the round kick, there will automatically be 180 degrees more spinning in the air, as long as the kick comes to the same target as it is assumed. And then if we go from 900...
So he kind of oversimplifies there, because he already brought up a case where you can be doing a round kick and a hook kick, and you have the same amount of rotation, and it was the example of the 540 and 720. So doing a round kick and doing a hook kick does not automatically put you into 180 degree away rotation categories, but it does when you do it in certain orders, like he's pointed out.
I'm gonna need a little elaboration on that, Bryce, actually. So what do you like? Are you talking about the difference between front side and back side? or like.
No, he literally just said if you're doing a hook kick versus a round kick, then that's going to dictate an additional 180 degrees of rotation.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just pointing out he's brought in situations where it's slightly more complicated than that already.
Right. Okay, got it. Yeah, I mean I could agree with that, but as a general rule, I think it follows.
Yeah, when you don't do anything further, when you don't decide to hyper or mega or adjust your stance in any way.
And I do actually want to bring up here while we're, I guess, talking about 9s and 10s, and he brought up the fact that it makes sense past a certain point. And that's kind of my argument, is I like that 9 is essentially in every situation is 1 twist round or 1.5 twist round, essentially, depending on where you took off from. And then it just goes from there. So 10 would be anything that's like the equivalent of essentially full hyper hook. And then it kind of snowballs from there. So I really like that about our current system, or our current numbering system, I should say. I don't like the whole kick terminology system,
but I guess that is still present in rotation reset conventions too, though, where the numbers evolve alongside the amount of rotation in a logical form. Typically, that 180 from hook to round.
Yeah.
No, but what Frank is pointing out is that now if I take off of frontside versus backside, what is a 900 what is a round kick corresponds to a different set of rotation denominations. It's no longer 540, 900, and 1260 and so on are all ending in round kicks. If you're taking off from different stances, then that 180 degrees at the beginning accounts for is accounted for in the name
but
of
that already doesn't exist in mainstream. Frontside 9 is literally 2 twists round.
Yeah, I honestly, even disregarding that argument, I still like this version better because we already have a shared understanding of 9 equals 1 twist round. Like that's it. And I honestly would fix the frontside kicks so it does reflect that as well. So honestly, the frontside kicks would end up being a lot more degrees off because of it.
You would go and make them less correct.
Yeah, but it's okay because we all understand, okay, what trickers understand as a 1 twist when it comes to, like a front flipping move, which would be half a twist. You round, there you go. That's it. Frontside 9, So
future archaeologists are going to think that trickers were just awful at math.
And I'll take it.
100 to 1080. It again makes sense. So this brings us back to how to fix the whole thing, the whole mess. And my suggestion is that the whole popular, well-known term of 540 kick will be completely gone. And it can be replaced with a very, very good term, swipe. Because in tricking, we already call this body position a swipe. Although quite often swipes are done more inverted, but more and more people recognize this position as a swipe, even though it's completely...
Yeah, I mean, this is basically the conclusion that we came to as well. You have so you have Caner 180, which is the trick that we're talking about normally, our tornado kick.
This is in BTT, by the way, guys.
Yeah, this is in BTT, even.
True trick terminology.
But yeah, Caner 1 would normally describe the tornado kick, taking off from your standard, what people normally call cheat, but it's really just, the Caner position, absolute hyper, and then taking off with your left leg swinging up. Usually your knee becomes bent because that's how people do their cheat kicks, but that's not that doesn't change the characteristic of a swing. And then by adjoining swipe to it, you are indicating that you are landing on an executed round kick, which we all agreed before, since whether you've gone inverted or not is taken care of by other aspects of the name in BTT. It's totally fine to have swipe denote any hypered round, whether you're inverted or not. So yeah, in TBTT, this would just be Caner 1 swipe, and yeah, we're in agreement with Johannes on that.
Well, I do think though that he's not even saying to use a number before that, though. Like I think the
No, he's
proposal
just
is
saying
to,
cheat swipe, and for
Right.
him, it's like these are all nicknames. So the fact that it's simple is going to be the most appealing part to it.
I mean, I think he'll eventually get to it. Like, I mean, it's not going to be this number, but like he would say cheat 9 swipe for what we think of as cheat 9 hyper or whatever. Because hyper, he actually gets that. So we'll listen to what he says.
well, I do, like Bryce said, we did come to that same conclusion that, you know, hyper and swipe
Mhm.
are two different things. Swipe is the variation that lands in hyper
Yeah.
or ultra even,
Yeah.
but is not necessarily related to the landing stance hyper.
Yeah, I can't exaggerate that enough. It's so important that people understand that actually. Right.
The vertical. So the 540 kick will be called cheat swipe. Then there will be swing swipe, backside swipe, and pop swipe. Actually, I will not call it a pop swipe because the pop is also a misleading term. That will be also changed to just front side because pop is basically a transition in trick.
Yeah,
Oh my
this-
god!
I know.
yeah, this
Oh
for
my
sure.
god.
We talk
Yes.
about more nuance. I don't know if he'll get into like sequential takeoffs for front side kicks, but this big time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, and it's literally in the name. You pop as a transition.
Mm-hmm.
You could punch into a pop
Mm-hmm.
9, so it just didn't make any sense. Sorry, Bryce, please.
No, watching other trickers independently come to the idea of disambiguating transitions from the tricks that you're doing after one is always just going to make me smile. That always just makes me...
Absolutely. Johannes, so this, you know, if you're watching this, this is like kind of the core principle of like BTT. And I implore you to, I guess, explore this as it pertains to the single leg takeoffs too. Because in our opinion, you could do a swing 9 that's done from a different transition. Like you do it from redirect, you could do it from reversal, you do it from a lot of different things. And so swing 9 is not a sufficient name for that.
Exactly. The swing swipe that you mentioned earlier. Which one?
Exactly. So, yeah, I implore you to kind of look at that. And BTT is kind of what covers that. That's what we really focus on there. So,
Yeah, some more highly specific stuff, but this though, this is the real thing. Is eliminating pop as a name and replacing it with frontside is perfect place to start.
Yes, go further.
King. And most of the time when people do these front sides, it's not even a pop, it's more like a punch. So backside will stay and pop will be now front side. And when it comes to the front side is actually spinning slightly more than the backside, but this doesn't really matter. In my opinion, the front side is close enough. So when there is very little twisting, like 360 or less, the naming will be based on the shape. The shapes that I'm showing here are the mostly used ones. Shuriken, D-leg, Feilong, and you could basically do these from any setup.
I kind of I like the simplification a little bit actually. Instead of us going into the weeds of saying like, oh, swing 1 shuriken, or like, you know what I mean, or whatever. I kind of like the idea of like, oh, it's just swing shuriken, or it's, you know, front side shuriken. I don't know. So I don't know what your guys
Kind of it sometimes it works, but when we get to like swing shuriken again, which swing and
Sorry, I mean,
Well,
I meant,
he just meant like eliminating the numbers for the very base one. So like instead of Kaner 1 swipe, just call it Kaner swipe.
for sure. And I mean that I would also kind of agree. I mean that it does seem like it would lend itself there. But then it's like
For me, my issue with it is like, how do I know whether it's a vert kick or an invert now? Because that was the role that the number was playing in the trick before, was denoting inversion or not as well. So now that you're telling me to do a Kaner swipe, I would think you're asking me to do an actual like Kaner and then switch my legs so I land on my right. That's what I would interpret if you told me to do a Kaner swipe.
Yeah. I think this is a good chance actually to explain ourselves a little bit with BTT, like very, very quick. But basically, exactly what Bryce was saying. We use numbers to denote if there's a kick done. And the reason why that's important to us is because we, like I said, we're abolishing swing, using different transitions to denote that you're doing a kick. So we need a different way. And to us, the most eloquent way we could find is actually just say what the inverted trick would have been. So, for example, for swing 9, it would have been a gainer if it was 0 twisting, and then say a number. And for here, I'm just going to use mainstream. So, like, gainer 9 would be like a swing 9, essentially. And you know it's a vert kick.
What people usually call swing 9. Obviously, there are lots of
Yes.
swing 9s, but when people are usually talking about swing 9, they mean what we would call a gainer 9 in BTT, or in TBTT, we would call it a gainer 5.
Yeah. And now suddenly you can vanish gainer 9, you could swing gainer 9, you can redirect gainer 9, all that stuff. And yeah. So
cheat, swing, front side, back side. And now that we got that out of the way, let's go to see the rotations. So what was called cheat 720 will be cheat 360. To me, this term makes perfect sense. This is like the true kicks terminology, but without the terms that make the names kinda clunky, kinda hard to use. Cheat 360 instead of cheat 360 hook. And because most people are not martial artists, we don't care if it's a hook kick or an outside crescent kick. When it comes to the 360s, the old 720s, these can be turboed, these can be shuriken, so then the term is gonna be 360 shuriken. Instead of shuriken, you can do a feilong, so you add shuriken round. Or instead of the shuriken,
I think it's worth bringing up something that he mentions that I think is broadly true for trickers, which is that people don't generally distinguish between outside crescents and hook kicks, inside crescents and round kicks, even though these are technically different tricks that have you doing they have you doing different leg motions, and they look different when executed. No one would say if you did a cheat 12 with a crescent kick that you hadn't done a cheat 12 because you didn't round kick, and other way around too. So, and similarly with other other kicks, people would always say, yeah, countsies, whether you did one or the other. Then the only people who I know of who would draw any major distinction at all are people who are very, very kick centric. But even then, I don't think they would ever say like, yeah, these are two fundamentally different tricks.
yeah, this is like pre-2012 tricking if you want to distinguish those. But
Yeah.
I think broadly people just say round and hook, even if you're doing crescents. So
Yeah, it's more as he pointed out before, it's more like the body shape that you end up achieving and where your leg, like the circles that your legs and feet end up making in the trick, more so than the actual like martial technique involved. No one really actually cares about that. It's more like, yeah, what shape did you achieve during the trick as a result?
exactly.
you can add D-leg. And it makes sense to call it 360 D-leg because the D-leg starts around the 360 rotation mark and it is led with the outside leg.
I forget, do we consider D-legs rounds or hooks in terms of like the number notation?
Rounds.
See, yeah, so he denoted it as a hook, and
I think it's hooks, because it kind of ends the same, like from a rotation perspective, it ends the same way that like a 540 does.
yeah. His argument was that you have the hook leg leading, and so it feels a lot like a hook, so he's denoting it with the hook notation.
Mine is that like you will always be doing essentially like a mega landing to get to that. Like, you'll like at the very least have to hit like that hyper crescent or that turboed crescent. So like you'd be more inclined to do a round kick variation here. But I guess technically you are doing the hook, but
I'm
I
inclined
can
to
definitely
agree with
see the
Jason,
argument.
honestly. But sorry, what were you saying, Bryce?
No, I said I can definitely see I could see the argument. I think there's potentially good arguments for both ways, but I think another thing to sort of like a trick that shows an example that perhaps maybe the round kick is the better way to classify D-leg is the entire concept of D-leg round as a kick type that you can do. It doesn't require you having to go back and move. You land exactly the same way you would land if you were doing like your normal cheat 9, cheat 540. You would do exactly the same cheat 9 parafuso and then round at the end. And if you had nobody saw the parafuso first, no one would have been able to tell that it wasn't just a good old fashioned cheat 9.
Potential like conversation for another time, but I believe that it's possible to shuriken and then also double leg, so like single to double leg as a transition. So I think that there's just some timing in there that it's just nuanced.
Yeah, this is definitely like getting in the weeds of it. So, for now I'm team round, but I think there's somewhat of an argument to be had for what Johannes is saying.
I'll go with round for now. I think that it's a delicate matter though.
Same as with hooks and crescents. And next we have our new 540 kick. It's not gonna be called 540 kick anymore, but the 540 rotation amount will be given to the old 900s category. So the 540 degree category kicks have at least one rotation in the air and the round kick that turns it to 540 degrees. And the 540 rotating kicks can basically have a round kick, a front kick, an inside crescent kick, and you can of course land these all on the kicking leg, and then it will be called a 540 swipe. So cheat 540 swipe, for example. And in this case actually a vanish 540 swipe, because cheat is only for the kicks that take off from the cheat setup. I think adding the term swipe instead of hyper on top of the 540 makes more sense, because if you think about it, if you would start learning tricking terminology like this, like I have presented in this video, since the very beginning, you are already familiar with the swipe from the lower level tricks. The cheat swipe, swing swipe, front side swipe, you never associated these to 540 before. So at that point it would make good sense, 540 swipe. And then after the 540 comes the 720. And again, it makes perfect sense. 720 degrees is spun in the air and ended with the hook kick. So here you got it. New terminology that makes perfect sense. Very, very little problems in this method. Just saying, this would make everything so much clearer. But even though I know that this makes so much sense, I know that many people, or almost all people, will just stick with the old terms instead. But this video was just...
We've accepted the same fate, Johannes.
Yeah, it's absolutely a fact that no matter how much sense it makes, and no matter how many good arguments you have, most people will just simply not do it just because it's more work. But yeah, I agree that from the perspective of like coming up with the names of new kicks, this is definitely this is like the fusion dance between TKT and mainstream as it exists now. But I do think that it's slightly better than what mainstream has going for it. I will say that he's already taken one step towards our position with eliminating pop from the name of so-called pop kicks. So got one.
Yeah, for sure. I think this doesn't really create new tricks, more so renames and kind of clarifies, which is always important. I think, with BTT, and we're getting a little bit more specific about takeoffs and like, decoupling transition from like takeoff stance in vert kicks is the next step forward. Obviously that's just like a huge change. So and that's what obviously what we're tackling. But
but keep putting out this...
I think that this is a really good like middle ground though. Like this is definitely a step in the right direction. I think Johannes has a lot of agreeable points here.
Listen, if we tomorrow adopted this overnight, I think we would be in a better position than we are currently, for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, it would certainly be one step closer towards our camp. So everybody do it. Everybody do it right now. But I will say one more word on the parafuso as it relates to which rotation category it belongs to.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that sort of is complicating this, I think potentially from other people's perspectives, but not from ours, because we've come up with a hard and fast rule on this a long time ago. But it's the idea that when you do a vert twisting round kick move, something like a 900, you could execute that round and sort of like stop in air facing your target and not move further, or you could continue your slight bit of rotation to land incomplete, ready for a swing through.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there are people who consider the second option as to be like you are completely done and finished and correctly executed cheat 9, as opposed to something where you've adjusted your landing stance.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were to think of it like that, then yeah, it really makes sense to. It doesn't really make sense to have it be 900 or 540 or any of that, because you are facing exactly the same way that you took off of, assuming that you took off from a caner position.
Mm-hmm.
So the only problem now is you have some weird thing to describe when people do something like a cheat 9 and then vanish rise without breaking their direction of momentum first.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't completed the cheat 9 somehow, and yet they did that trick and then vanished a rise out of it. So you have to come up with a name for doing a cheat 9 where you didn't finish it all the way,
Right.
instead of just having cheat 9, but I landed it in incomplete.
Right. Exactly.
Which is much simpler. So that's why we would always have the first available rotation for landing for the trick be the canonical one.
Mm-hmm.
And so here, a cheat 9 landing in complete is not its canonical landing. It's actually a cheat 9 landing in mega that we consider to be canonical.
I agree. And likewise, I believe that 7s would be like a hyper, and specifically short hyper, I guess. I don't think it matters actually if it's short or absolute hyper, but yeah, good points. But yeah, keep making these trick theory videos, Johannes. I really like them. And yeah, everyone out there, keep doing trick theory. It's a good time. Catch you guys later.
Yeah, more content like this.
Yeah.